Good morning, everybody participating to this webinar on Chesar 3. It's a very beautiful day today in Helsinki, and we are very happy because it's the official release of Chesar 3. Some of you may be newcomers who have not worked with Chesar before, and some others have already worked with Chesar 2 and are just interested to learn more about the new features coming with Chesar 3. We hope that this webinar will be useful for both the newcomers and the experienced users. We have actually 3 hours for presenting you the tool. As you probably have already seen from the agenda, we split the presentations in 12 sessions, and we have 4 speakers here in ECA: Andreas Arens, Roberta Bernasconi, Stefano Flattini, and myself, Hélène Magot. We will take you through the full workflow of Chesar, however, not for each step in all the details. 3 hours seems long, but it will be too short to go into all the potential details of a chemical safety assessment. There is in particular one topic which we will not cover in our presentations. This is the assessment of what we call complex cases, meaning substances which have complex compositions with differentiated behavior of constituents, or substances which transform on use or in the environment. Andreas will say a bit more about this later. Although this was the key reason to upgrade Chesar 2 to Chesar 3, it is too much to cover in this webinar. You can find some information about it in the IUCLID manual, in the IUCLID help text, in the Chesar 3 manual, and in the Chesar help text. We hope that this will be a start for you. This webinar will be recorded, so you can watch it afterwards if you want. The various functionalities of Chesar 3 will be illustrated during the webinar with examples. Many of those examples are based on the ECA CSR illustrative example, which has been published 4 years ago in May 2012, with connected Chesar 2.1 and IUCLID 5.4 files. You can find the link here. This example is being updated at present. And what we plan is to provide a preliminary IUCLID 6 and Chesar 3 files very soon on the Chesar website in the library section. But all the updated documents for the CSR illustrative example on ECA website will become available after summer. Nevertheless, the content of the various demonstrations is not always consistent. They are meant to illustrate the functionalities and are not based on real cases. We encourage you to submit your questions at any time through the Q&A panel that you can access in your webinar window. If you do not see the Q&A panel, double-click on the main window to minimize it. You can maximize the main window again if you want to see the presentation by double-clicking on it. If you want to concentrate your attention to follow the presentations, you can also send us questions during the 30 minutes after the end of the presentations. Our panelists will answer most of the questions as possibly directly through the Q&A panel, but we also intend to reply orally to some questions, if more appropriate, during the afternoon session, which will take place between 2 and 4 Helsinki time. Please try to submit questions which are really related to the webinar topic and do not include any confidential business information. If your questions are not answered by the end of the webinar, you can send them using our contact form. If you wish to ask something more specific, or if your question contains confidential business information, please use our contact form. If you experience any difficulties with the webinar tool, please contact our support team using the Q&A panel or by email. And now, a short promo video before Andreas will introduce Chesar.
Do you have to register your chemicals under REACH? Do you need to communicate their safe use to your customers? Are you struggling to create your chemical safety assessments? then Chesar is the tool for you. Chesar stands for the Chemical Safety Assessment and Reporting Tool. It has been developed by the European Chemicals Agency to help you to efficiently create the safety assessments for your chemicals. The tool guides you through the chemical safety assessment in a systematic way. It allows you to generate chemical safety reports to be sent to authorities as part of the registration dossier and exposure scenarios to be annexed to your safety data sheets. Chesar interacts effectively with IUCLID and other programs and tools. It has an extensive import and export functionality, keeping the data in IUCLID, the chemical safety report, and the exposure scenario consistent as required by REACH. Different industry sectors develop importable content such as use maps to inform about the uses of chemicals in a harmonized and structured way, SPERCs to inform about environmental release values and related conditions of use, SCEDs to inform about the conditions of use by consumers, and SWEDs to inform about the conditions of use by workers. Chesar provides an all-in-one solution for chemical safety assessment under REACH. The tool is available for everyone, free of charge. Download Chesar now.
Yeah, good morning. I will now provide some more details on Chesar as a whole before we come later on then to the demonstration of the different functionalities within Chesar. The overview will include a reminder on the chemical safety assessment workflow under REACH, a bit on terminology, on use and exposure scenarios, key terms that you will need to understand Chesar workflow on chemical safety assessment, the flow of data between the different actors in the chemical safety assessment, the workflow and the related functionalities. In Chesar, consistency, a summary of consistency and efficiency gains you can get with Chesar, and the summary of the main changes that come with Chesar 3. The assessment workflow under REACH starts with a hazard assessment. That means after the information requirements are fulfilled, the registrant starts with assessing the hazards of the substance. That means he derives the denotes, the PNECs, and the classification and labeling. In parallel, he collects information on the uses and the conditions of use, the existing conditions of use of the substance. This information is then compiled together in the exposure assessment. That means exposure scenarios are derived, and then based on these exposure scenarios, exposure estimates are derived, and then the hazard is compared with the exposure estimates, and the risk characterization is derived. And then depending on the outcome of this, either safe use can be demonstrated, and then it goes to the reporting, or the assessment needs to be refined either on the hazard side or on the exposure side. If without iteration or with iteration, then control of risk can be demonstrated. The chemical safety report is derived and is sent to the authorities and put to the own files, and the conditions of safe use are communicated down the supply chain with a safety data sheet. A more detailed explanation on the workflow is included in ECHA guidance. It's in particular the guidance part D of the guidance on information requirements and chemical safety assessment. Who is interested can look into this guidance for more detail. A few words on terminology. There are key terms which play a role, in particular in the interaction between the use description and the exposure assessment. It's on the one hand the life cycle. That means all the uses are described in a life cycle structure, and each use becomes a name. And then there are contributing activities. That means activities by workers or activities by consumers that contribute to this use, and also contributing activities from the environmental perspective. And both perspectives need to be described and get names. That means there will be a contributing activity name for the environment and for each of these activities, an environmental release category is assigned, which is called here ERC. And for workers, the contributing activities are also be named, and then a fitting process category is assigned. That's the part which is done on the use side, and then the information is handed over to the exposure assessment, and the use name becomes the name of the exposure scenario, and the names of the contributing activities become the name of the contributing scenarios. And in the contributing scenarios, then the conditions of use are described from the environmental perspective and from the human health perspective. And for each of the contributing scenarios, the exposure estimates are then derived. For the environment, that's the upper part of the slide, that means for all environmental compartments, and also for exposure of humans via the environment. And then for workers in this case, for each activity of a worker, also the exposure is estimated then on the different routes. So keep in mind that these are the key terms: contributing activity and contributing scenario. Going further to the data flow, that means Chesar sits within a data flow among different actors, which act within a chemical safety assessment under REACH. It starts with two information sources. The one information source is the information on uses and conditions of use. And in an ideal case, downstream use sectors have derived use maps, and these can be then uploaded by the single Chesar user. And what we plan, that's also indicated here in the slide, what we plan is that ECHA will host a dedicated web page where use map information for registrants can be stored as a single point of access. The other information which the registrant loads into Chesar is the information on substance properties. This comes from the registrant's IUCLID database. And then Chesar brings plugged in or built-in exposure tools with what the exposure based on the substance properties and the use information can be estimated. The built-in tools are the two tools from the target risk assessment for workers and consumers, and for the environment it's users. What is also possible to report assessments from external exposure tools and also assessments based on measured data. This information is then, once the safety assessment is concluded, this information is then included in a chemical safety report, and the information is again exported to IUCLID, that means to the registrant's IUCLID database, means the CSR document as such, and selected information and extract of information on use description and exposure assessment. And from the registrant's IUCLID database, the information is then going to ECHA's database on chemicals, and from there, ECHA and member states can retrieve information, and non-confidential information is disseminated to the public. And a second route is the information that goes to the downstream users in the market, whether the exposure scenarios for communication, and ECHA exports the information on safe use to downstream users in an XML exchange format, which would then need to be included and further processed in the downstream users' systems. So I come now to the workflow in Chesar itself. There are what we call in Chesar the boxes. The first box is about substance properties. The second box is about use description. The third box is the exposure assessment. The fourth box is supporting the chemical safety report building. The fifth is the exposure scenario for extended safety data sheets. And then there is a library with elements or ingredients for a chemical safety assessment that is available. And the last box is user management. The Chesar workflow is very much mimicking the REACH workflow, which I showed in the beginning. It's the assessment of the properties of the substance, the results from the hazard assessment. This is done in IUCLID. The information is then imported and that's the box 1, into Chesar. And what can also be done from box 1 is to import or export full CSAs that had already been carried out. And the uses are described in box 2 in a cycle structure, life cycle structure, and also here the tonnages for the different users are assigned. And again, this box has an import-export function where use maps or CSA blocks can be imported or exported. Then the information goes to box 3, which is then the conditions of use, where the conditions of use are reported in exposure scenarios. A quantitative exposure assessment is carried out, and then a quantitative or a qualitative risk characterization follows. Quantitative risk characterization is carried out when a DNAL is available, and a qualitative risk characterization when no DNAL is available, or PNEC is available. And this assessment is fed from CSA elements in the library that can be conditions of use, standard conditions of use, that can be specific environmental release categories, that can be specific consumer exposure determinants, and it can be standard phrases, which can be loaded from the library in Chesar into the actual assessment. And again, here's an import and export function. That means from the library, library objects can be imported from external sources or can also be exported. When the assessment is then finished, in box 4, the CSR can be generated. That means the section 9 and 10 dealing with the exposure assessment and with the risk characterization can be derived. And then together with Euclid, the full CSR can be derived, means then the chapters 1 to 8 are added to chapter 9 to 10, and then the full CSR is there. And then the data are exported to Euclid from here. And the last is then the extract of the exposure scenario for the extended safety data sheet. That's the box 5. And from there, it's exported to the company's EHS systems in an SCOM XML exchange format. So that's, in a nutshell, what Chesar can do. And finally, I will now summarize a few benefits you can gain from Chesar. It's first of all the consistency. That means there is Chesar supports consistency between the Euclid, the substance properties and the use descriptions in Euclid, that means in the technical dossier, and the chemical safety assessment and the related chemical safety report. And there's also another area of consistency, that means the information, the consistency between the information that is sent to the authorities with the CSR or stored in the own documents and the information that is communicated down the supply chain. The second element of benefits is standardization, and standardization gives efficiency gains for all actors involved in this. Of course, the core element in this is a systematic workflow, which is carried out in pretty the same way from all the assessors that work with Chesar. Then the use maps bring standardization on use descriptions and describing conditions of use. And here we could see two levels of efficiency. The one is that the single assessor for the registrant uses suitable use descriptions, SPERCs, GETs, SWETs, and collect this information from various downstream user websites as a single information element and gets this into his library. What is even a more efficient way is if the assessor would upload integrated use map packages from a single point of access. We have then, as another element of standardization, the standard phrases from the SCOM catalog and the exchange format, the XML exchange format. The standard phrases are in particular needed for communicating exposure scenarios down the supply chain. Then we have the chemical safety report format, and as another element of standardization, the exposure scenario for communication format. Another area of efficiency is what happens in the single assessment. That means for the user of Chesar, it's of course that Chesar enables the reuse of information across substances. That means assessment elements that have been used for one substance can be also applied for another substance. Then some exposure estimation tools are integrated. That means the calculation can be done automatically. Then we have a number of bulk actions in Chesar. That's bulk actions at substance level, so where information is valid for all the users but has only to be entered once. And there's of course information that is specific, use specific, and then is to be entered at exposure scenario level. And what is also possible, if there is information that is relevant for groups of contributing scenarios, you enter this for one contributing scenario, and then it can be copied automatically to all the other contributing scenarios where it's also relevant. We have then in Chesar the automated generation of documents, the chemical safety report, the exposure scenarios for communication, and the exchange of data. And Chesar facilitates updates. That means if new information comes in, the new information on substance, it's recalculated with the plugged-in exposure tools. For example, if a vapor pressure has changed, then the tool calculates automatically the exposure estimates or release estimates. And if new or changed users are identified, they are then integrated within the existing assessment. For those who have been using already Chesar 2, a short overview on what is new in Chesar 3. It's the one element which Elaine already mentioned in her introduction. Chesar 3 supports assessments where more than one set of intrinsic substance properties plays a role in the chemical safety assessment. And that may, for example, be the case when different compositions exist for a substance and these compositions have different hazard profiles, for example, due to impurities. Or a substance is transforming on use or environment into other chemical structures, and the parent substances and the transformation products play a role in the assessment. Or substances which have various constituents and where the constituents behave very differently when they are used at a workplace or when they enter into the environment. The communication with IUCLID is improved in Chesar 3. There are now also contextual help text. That means for each screen you see there's a help text available to explain the main fields and which information is expected. There's more efficiency in the chemical safety assessment process due to bulk actions, and risk characterizations can be done based on concentrations for local effects. So this is again a bulk action where the risk can be demonstrated to be controlled for various users at the same time, just based on the concentration in the end-use product. And there's more flexibility in the environmental assessment. That means there's a possibility to provide specific settings for the biological treatment plant, and there's a possibility to report data from other exposure tools than e-users. That brings me to the end of my presentation, and I would hand over now to Roberta for the first demonstration.
Thank you, Andreas. And here I am. I would like to demonstrate to you the communication between IUCLID and Chesar. To do so, I'm already logged in my Chesar, and this is the box 1, as Andreas described. The other boxes are not yet available for selections because I have no substances available in my database. Chesar is working with the substance properties, and the way to get the substance properties in the Chesar database is to import them directly from IUCLID. In Chesar 3, the import functionality from IUCLID is very easy. It has been improved. There is a connection via web service. The only thing that you have to take care of is that your IUCLID database is running while you are searching within it. In my case, I have the configuration for which I have my Euclid 6 desktop version available in my computer, which is running, here it is, and my Chesar 3. And with this setting, basically, the users have to do nothing because everything is already preset. The web service connection is already by default available for this configuration. In case you have a Euclid which is running in a server environment, you will have to ask your IT department to provide you the correct Euclid URL and the username and password, which might change from the default. Anyway, in my setting, again, as I said, I have to do nothing. What I need to do is just to press the button search, and I am the information on the content of my Euclid database is available in the pane down. If you want to have the proof, so this is my Euclid, the Euclid 6, and these are the two substances which are the same as you visualize here. So basically what I need to do is just to click on the import button to get the substance inside my Chesar. I want to point out the fact that at the moment I have no selected substance, as you can see in the top bar of the Chesar application, and no CSA, of course, because my database is empty. As soon as I'm importing my substance, this test substance for demonstration, I get the notification from the system that everything was fine, and immediately the selected substance is the one that I have imported. If I have a long list of substances in my database, a good tip is maybe to search for the desired substance by entering, for example, a partial name of the chemical name, so that you have the restricted search. But let's go back to my substance management tab, in which now I can see that my test substance for demonstration is uploaded in Euclid, in Chesar. The import is giving already the fact that a default CSA is created, and you don't have to bother in creating other CSA unless you are in a joint submission, you are the lead and you want to create two different CSAs. But maybe we will talk about this a bit later. Anyway, the first tab in which you can see exactly what is the content of your substance is the identity of the substance. So it's read-only information from basically the reference substance available in Euclid. And then you have the physical chemical fate properties, in which you have some properties which are fetched directly from Euclid. As you can see, there is the property name, the value, and then the other useful information, the input parameter for the assessment, the estimation tools already available and embedded in Chesar. So those are the ones in which the exposure assessment tool is appearing, are the properties used by them. Just for you to understand, so this is my test substance, what it is shown in Euclid is the content of the endpoint summary. So this is the table of content of my substance. For example, I have the physical form, which is liquid. And if I open my endpoint appearance physical form, I can see that in my endpoint summary, the key value for the chemical safety assessment is liquid. So this is how it works with the relationship between Euclid and Chesar. So Chesar displays as a read-only the full information available in the key value for chemical safety assessment from the summary records, not from the endpoint records. The only thing that can be edited is the molecular weight. As you can see here, there is this different display of the molecular weight used for assessment. And by default, it uses the upper bound limit in case of ranges for the molecular weight, but you are free to change this within the range, of course. Chesar will not give you the possibility to input some other molecular weight which are outside the ranges. So the other properties, as said, are just read-only. So you have the biodegradation information, the bioaccumulation, the abiotic degradation, and absorption coefficient. Just for you to remind, we have, as Andreas said, we have in Chesar 3 the contextual help text, which is available on clicking on the little question mark with the orange background, which will give you information related to the page in which you are. So it's a really nice improvement, and we invite you to read it through. The next tab is the fate in standard biological STP. Also, Andreas introduced the fact that the default releases percentages calculated by the simple treat model in uses can be overwritten by the user. Of course, the one that you have by default are the one calculated from the substance properties available in your Euclid database. Then there is another tab in which you have the summary of the physical chemical hazard. And then finally, the last tab is related to the hazard conclusion and scope of assessment for the environment, for the workers, consumers, and man-by-environment. For the environment, you have also the information related to the PBT assessment, which is coming from the Euclid section 2.3, always the endpoint summary. As you can see, the PBT status is available here, and it's the same, of course, of what you can see in Chesar. Then for each protection target, you have the information on the hazard conclusion, which is again available in Euclid. So if I'm going to section 6 of my Euclid, I have the ecotoxicological information and the information related to all protection targets is available here. So for each compartment, I have the information on the PNAC, if it is available, the value, and also the explanation for other conclusion, again as a read-only from Euclid. If you click on this little cloud, blue cloud, you can see the explanation as it is entered in Euclid. Another information that is given in this view is the risk characterization type, which is in case of PNAC, of course, it's the quantitative type. I would like to remind you that for sediment, fresh water, for sediment, marine water, and for soil, we have also the information on the extrapolation method, which is important because, as you might remember, there is an increase of a factor of 10 in case the extrapolation method is equal to equilibrium partitioning, and the KOW is greater than 5, or in case it's not available, the log KOW is greater than 3. So be careful because your RCR can be quite different from expected. So the same, it applies to all the other compartment. And in this case, for example, for the air, I have no other identified indicated in Euclid. And this is giving the information from Chesar that it's not needed to perform any risk characterization for this type. Then I'm going to the workers tab, in which basically it's more or less the same information, meaning that I need to go to my Euclid section 7, and I have the toxicological information, which are again displayed as a read-only in this tab. And again, here for each inhalation, for each route and type of effect, I have the related answer conclusion with the statements and the scope of assessment, basically, so the risk characterization type. So that in case of DNL, I have the value and the fact that a quantitative risk characterization is needed. In case I have no hazard as a conclusion, the risk characterization is not needed. In case I have low, medium, or high hazard, a qualitative risk characterization type is needed. The same happens for all the other routes. And my colleague in the next presentation will demonstrate you the use of the concentration limit in case you will need to set it. Same is for the consumer. Again, it's the same endpoint summary that gives the information also for the consumer. It's, again, the same display, meaning that you have all the routes and the type of effects. And, of course, for the general population, so for the consumer, you have also the hazard for oral route. The last tab is the one related to demand by environment, in which you have the information, again, from Euclid, that is used for calculating the demand by environment assessment. Having said that, we are at the end of our communication, let's say, the basic communication, so the import of the substance. But what I would like to demonstrate to you is the fact that it could be that something is changing in one of the endpoints in Euclid. Therefore, you have maybe to reset the conclusion for the assessment. Therefore, you might need really to change the assessment. For example, I am already in the toxicological information. It could be that due to other studies or whatever, you need to change, for example, the DNL from 24.7 to, for example, 20 milligram per liters. So I will save this one. And of course, now it's up to the user to synchronize the two systems in a way that the same information is available in the two. What I will have to do, again, it would be to go to my Euclid, sorry, my Chesar, the search for the substance from Euclid, import, and I will get the message from the system that something has changed and there are some effects in the calculation. Of course, in my example, I did not do any calculations, but of course, in case of assessment done, you will get the RCR recalculated because you changed the value of DNL. Okay, I can overwrite it. Now my substance is overwritten, and of course, if I'm going to the worker, I will have the new value appearing. The same, it applies if something is changing, for example, in, I don't know, the vapor pressure. You have new studies for which really you have to change the value. So you can change it from 5, for example, to 10. The temperature will leave it as it is. And again, I can save it. And if I'm synchronizing back, I will see the repercussion that I have in my assessment. And this is what I have. I have the notification, and then I have the other information related to my assessment. Okay, I will not synchronize. But what I forgot to mention before is that from box 1, it's true that you can import the substances via the substance properties via web service from Euclid, but you can also import some Chesar files which have been already created by somebody else or yourself. And basically, it's the import works both with the version of Chesar 2.3 and Chesar 3. For example, now of course, by clicking this import Chesar substance file, my Explorer is opening. So I will select my ECA substance, and immediately my selected substance now has changed with the latest one that I have selected, and I have my substance already in the database. So this is what I wanted to present you. Now I will give the floor to Andreas that will introduce you the Box 2 functionality in Chesar. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Roberta. I will now demonstrate how to describe the uses of a substance in the life cycle tree structure of Chesar. For this, I move to Box 2. And what you see here is the Box 2. When you start an exposure assessment in a use description, that means on the left-hand side where the life cycle tree will emerge over the time. There's nothing at the moment except of a starting node, but what is already there on the right-hand side where all the information is to be entered for the different uses and contributing activities. What you see here is a summary of the uses or an overview of the uses of the substance. This overview, which can be entered in Box 2, is then later on included in the introduction of the chemical safety report in Chapter 9. So that there, in the beginning of the exposure assessment, there is then a summary of the uses. In the example, we have a substance that is mainly used as an additive for inks and coatings and lubricants. It functions as a co-emulsifier, anti-foam or wetting agent, and usually it's included in mixtures for industrial and professional applications in a concentration up to 2%, and consumer products in a concentration up to 1%, so it's a minor component. The substance is manufactured in a closed system. It's formulated into coatings, inks, lubricants in a very standard formulation process for liquid mixtures in batch usually. And the coatings are used in a wide variety of applications in industry, in professional, and by consumers. So it's by spraying, it's by dipping, it's by brushing. So all what you do with paint. The application for the lubricants is a bit more specific. It's a smaller market, and it's only about special industrial applications. So having said that, I would move now to define the first use, and of course I start with my own manufacture. That means the manufacturing that happens at the registrant site. I right-click on the starting node, and then I click Add, so that I can add a use, and now I can select the lifecycle stage in which I want to describe the use. It's manufacture. And I start then with quickly describing my manufacturing process. So it's a multi-stage process in solvent. It's closed. It's with ambient temperature. And no water is involved. No water involved. And the waste is treated on site. Treated on site. Okay. Then I can enter the tonnage, and I have a manufacturing tonnage of about 320 tons a year, and this is all manufactured at one site. No further remarks needed, so I would then save the information, and now the tool tells me that I can't save because I've forgotten something very important. I have forgotten to give the use a name, which is the major identity of a use later on if I work with the whole lifecycle tree. So I enter a use for the name, and I would like to use standard phrases for this. And so it's manufacturer, and I would like to find a suitable standard phrase for this. I look that through, and there I find one which is simply the manufacturer. I select this. And then I would like also to include information that this is closed manufacturer. Again, I look whether I find something standard for this, because I would always prefer to have standard phrases over freely invented names, if possible. So I help the system to put the closed, and then I find something here, closed system. And then I enter this, and now I should be able to save the use description. And yes, so the system confirms the manufacturing has been saved in the system, and I see now on the left-hand side the first use occurring. What I need to do then is to define contributing activities for this use. For this, again, I go with a right-click and I say Add, and then I can select either an environmental contributing activity or a worker. I start with the environment, and I get already the use description. What I would like to add now is that this happens without water contact. And what I try again to find whether there is a phrase available. No water contact, and that probably now I did a mistake. That means I cancel this. Yes, and I start again. So it's relatively easy to start again if you did a mistake. I start with this, and I would like to look now whether I find something here for no water involved. See what the standard phrases have available. Yes, indeed, there is something. It's called dry process. It's not really a dry process, but it says no water used in the process. I use this now for the demonstration. Then I would need to assign environmental release category. In this case, the system tells me there is only one available. Since this is the manufacturer, I select this. Remarks are not really needed. I click on Save, and then the system tells me it has been saved. And it appears now here on the left-hand side that a contributing activity for the environment has been defined. Now I do the same for workers, again, adding worker contributing activity. Now I don't forget to give it a name. There is no name predefined yet. And I would give it the name closed, fully automated manufacturing process. Okay, this is clear, probably don't need explanation now for the CSR. All those who have worked already with Chesar 2 know probably now what comes now is the assignment of a proc, and there is one process category which is used for this, that is the proc 1 for the closed system. And again, I save. System tells me I have included all information, and then the proc 1 occurs here as the worker contributing scenario. I don't need more now because this is a fully integrated closed process where even the system cleaning is done automated in a closed process. So the next lifecycle stage would be now the formulation. And for the formulation, it's a very standard process for liquid mixtures, and I have already a use block here in my files. That means in this case, I don't edit manually, but I import a block for this from my files. And then I go now to the right file. I need to open that here. And then I find here a block for formulation, generic liquid mixtures. I click this, I open this, and the system imports that into my lifecycle tree. And if I expand this, you see that this already has all standard contributing activities relevant for formulation inherited. However, what I need to do, you see this here, the tonnage is of course a generic one. It can't be applied for my assessment since this is a generic block. So what I need to do now is I need to update this generic information to my specific assessment. That is mainly the tonnage. This is for my all manufacturing tonnage, so I enter here 320 tons, and the technical function of my particular substance in formulation in general is the defoaming. So I see whether I have a standard function available. Yes, the defoamer is here. Then I clean my internal remarks that told me that this is a generic block and that I need to adapt the information for the specific assessment. I can clean this because it's now a specific assessment. I save this, and then you see that the tonnage is updated here. That's all what I need to do. The other activities are pretty standard and the same. What I would need to do as a next step is to describe the end uses of paints and coatings, inks. And for this, the sector organization has recently made available a use map, and I want to import the use map. I do that in the same way like I did before. I import it as a CSA block. I go to a website. I find there the use map for coating. I open this. The system imports that. And then it occurs here as a market. That means as my market and the conditions of use and the uses in this market for coatings and inks for my substance. What I see now, it's integrated in the life cycle tree at the wrong place. So it should come after the formulation and not before the formulation. But this is easy to correct. I simply right-click the formulation and move that one stage up. And now the life cycle tree fits. So first the stuff is formulated and then it goes into the market. Again, I have a situation here that I need to adapt the tonnages. So I open this and I include what I know from my marketing people is that approximately 200 of the 320 tons go into the paint market. The other 120 go into the lubricant market, which I will not use here in the demonstration. Okay, I clean again my internal remarks because this is now adapted to the single assessment, and I save. What I do now is I expand the market, and what you see now is that it includes already from the use map a use, I make that now a bit bigger that you can see this, a general industrial use of coatings and inks with quite some activities below that. That means all kinds of things what you can do with paintings at an industry side. Then professional uses, professional painting, consumer painting, and it also includes 2 uses for the service life because it's an additive. That means it remains in the dried coating, and the one for the professional use is a use that is about removing coatings from surfaces. That means what is normally called paint stripping. And the other is simply consumers living in a room where large surfaces are covered by dried coatings. So this is the 2 service lives that have been defined in the use map by the downstream sector. What I would show you now is how I adapt the use description for the industrial side to my particular substance. The scenario description is already there. What I need to do again is the tonnage. Again, an estimate from my marketing people say approximately half of our substance goes to industrial uses and the other to professional and consumer uses. So I put here now from 200, the half is 100. And now I need to make a remark on something which you probably have already observed. Always when I adapt a tonnage, a warning message occurs. And the warning message rightly states that there is a connection between the use tonnage and the local tonnages for the environment contributing scenarios in box 3. So that is correct. But the rest of the message is unfortunately incorrect. and you need to be aware of that this is a mistake in the current Chesar 3. So the message tells you the local tonnage for the environmental contributing scenario in box 3 will be recalculated, and this is wrong. It's not recalculated. You need to adapt it if you change tonnages in the use description. Keep that in mind. We have also highlighted that in the release note. Okay, what I would then do is, so the product categories are already there. The technical function at industrial use of paintings is, of course, the same what I had before. It's a defoamer. I would need to include that here again. But there are two other uses which also play a role, but which are not included in the list of default functions. So I click Other, and that enables that I add other functions that my substance also have in paints. It's working as a co-emulsifier, and it's working as a wetting agent. Good, and then I need to adapt one other information. This is also specific to my substance. So my substance is not a solvent. That means it doesn't evaporate on use, but it's an additive which will remain in the dry paint. So I need to link to the service life. That means dried coatings on large indoor surface. That is what is relevant for consumers, and removing coatings from surfaces, paint stripping, that is relevant for professional users. And then I do the same what I did before. I simply clean my internal remarks, because this is now an adapted use description adapted for my substance. I save. And then you see that here the tonnages for the industrial side are adapted. I would do now the same for professional consumers. I would like to show you for the final thing, one thing for the service life professional. I open this. What you see here now is that there is a bit of a description. That means it's about any activity under high energy conditions like sanding, machining, and burning outside industrial sites. So what you can do with coatings if you want to remove it. Here's a bit of a description that this is a use description which applies to coatings of various materials. The tonnage, this is a tricky thing. But the estimate from our resistance perspective is again that approximately half of the tonnages we provide into the market may at the one or the other point in time are subject to paint stripping operations. So I put here then 100 tons. Same warning message, which is wrong. And then the technical function of my additive at this life cycle stage, this is a particular one, it has no function anymore. That means I would go here now to no function, which I have in my default list of functions. If I'm down to no function, here. I click this, I clean my internal remarks, and I save. So with this, I'm at the end of my demonstration. I will then hand over now to Elaine, and what she will do is she will explain how the assessment is then done in box 3. So if I would open now here a contributing activity for the environment and switch to box 3, but then I close, Elaine will continue.
Thank you, Andreas. So I will now introduce the key feature of exposure assessment in Chesar. What will happen is that I will present the general principles, and after the break, we will demonstrate them with 3 presentations on environmental assessment, workers' assessment, and consumer assessment. So I will go through the different content. So first, the conditions of use or contributing scenarios, then the release for the environment and exposure estimation for everything, the risk characterization, and a particular topic on environmental assessment for the aggregated sources. So as you probably know, the exposure assessment is to be carried out in box 3 of Chesar. It's done by selecting a contributing activity in the life cycle tree, as Andreas explained. And when selecting a contributing activity in the right pan, you can see on the left pan the release for the environment or the exposure tab, which is selected and contain 4 sections: the condition of use, the release for the environment, exposure estimates, and the daily intake in food items for the environment. There is another tab, which is the risk characterization, and then a validate assessment button. So here you see everything. On the left, the life cycle tree. On the top, the release and exposure tab, and then the risk characterization tab. In the release and exposure tab, you have 4 sections, and then you have this validate assessment button. So I will start with the section on the conditions of use, which is both for environment and human health. So globally, the conditions of use, they can be either manually selected, meaning entered by the user selecting from his library, or they can also be pre-populated by inserting harmonized elements, which may be SPERCs for the environment assessment, SCEDs or ESETOC-TRA subcategories for consumer assessment, and for workers, the SWEDs are not yet implemented. They will be implemented in the next version. So that's the way. That's how it looks like, the conditions of use section on the screen. You see the different exposure scenarios subheading, and here I have a few conditions of use which are already there, and there will be the possibility to add new condition of use. Built-in conditions of use, what are those? Those are conditions of use which are always in the Chesar library, so they are delivered with the tool. There is a few, and among those, there are a few which are systematically present in each contributing scenario when you get started. So for the environment, there are conditions of use on use amount, on the biological STP, which is modeled in uses via the model simple treat, and then the receiving surface water flow rate, and some particular considerations for waste treatment operations. For the workers, you have 5 conditions of use which are always there by default when you get started, which is the percentage of the substance in a mixture, the physical form of the product which is used, the duration of the activity, the place of use, and the operating temperature. For consumer, you have 2 conditions of use which are built in and present by default. There are a few other built-in conditions of use available in your library, and we will demonstrate a few in the later presentations. For selecting the conditions of use, if they are based on SPERCs or SCEDs, then first of all, the SPERCs or the SCEDs should be present in your library, and you will have to click on a pick list and select your SCED or your SPERC. And there are a number of rules which are implemented in the tool to filter out the relevant SPERCs or SCED for your case, based on, for example, the ERC, the PC, etc., the product category, etc. When the conditions of use are manually selected, you have to select those which you want to add in your contributing scenario from your library. So what you want to add need to be already in your library, and we'll have a presentation later on the library that you understand a bit better how the information gets there for you to use. Just a small side topic. For users in rigorously contained system, there is a new feature in Chesar 3. So what do we mean by use in rigorously contained system? It's first for the environment with minimization of releases, and for human health with strict control for manual intervention. So the definition are similar as what you have for closed system or the Article 1718 definitions on the strictly controlled conditions. It's more or less the same principle. And the idea is that it's possible to flag those in Chesar 3. The information is exported to IUCLID, and it can be used by the authorities when prioritizing the substances for further regulatory actions for low priority. What you have to be aware is that the description of the condition of use is key. Indeed, the flag will be used by IT screening, but a manual screening will be used to get confirmation that the use are indeed in a rigorously contained system. Residual release and exposure should be provided also. And you see below the screenshot on how it looks like in Chesar, a flag, and then the possibility to add the condition is as normal. Now we'll go to the next section on the release and exposure part. So the release part for the environment, specific to the environment. You have seen on the left side, I've selected a contributing scenario for the environment. There are 4 methods for release estimation available in Chesar. It's like in Chesar 2. It can be SPERC-based if a SPERC has been selected for the conditions of use. It can be ERG-based, or it can be based on an estimated release factor. And it can also be based on a measured release rate. The exposure estimates, so this is the screen that you see for an environmental contributing scenario, and this is the screen you see for workers or consumer contributing scenario, no release. So the exposure estimate part, for each protection target for human health, or for each route and type of effect for the environment, exposure estimates are required for quantitative risk characterization, and they may be also very useful for qualitative risk characterization. There are 3 exposure estimation methods available in Chesar 3. Built-in tools, which means that the exposure is calculated in Chesar, either using the SETOC TRA workers or the SETOC TRA consumer or users. External tools, meaning that the calculations and the assessment is done outside Chesar using an exposure assessment estimation tool. In this case, exposure estimates, explanations about them if relevant, and related conditions of use are either manually reported in Chesar or are imported in Chesar if an export file is available in the Chesar-related format from those tools. And as a last, it's also possible to manually report data coming from measured data. The risk characterization ratio are displayed together side by side with the exposure estimates when exposure estimates are provided in this tab. Now, just a short note on the validate assessment. It's a button. In fact, it means information on plugged-in tools. That's what you will get. It's provided so information on the exposures data sets. For example, if the substance properties boundary, the substance properties are outside the boundaries supported by the tool, or explanations why no exposure is provided because of the applicability domain of the tool, these kind of things. So just try it. Now the risk characterization, so it's a different tab. The risk characterization is also, the type is defined by protection target for human health and route and for the environment, and route and protection and type of effect for human health, sorry. And it depends on the hazard conclusion, which have been imported from IUCLID, as Roberta showed in the first presentation. There is a risk characterization icon. So it says it's green and red for each route or type or protection target, and also at the contributing scenario level. So the tool needs to understand when the risk is considered control and when it's not considered control. So for quantitative risk characterization, there is the RCR, which is calculated on the basis of the previously reported main exposure and the PNEC or the DINA. And the tool understands if the risk characterization ratio is above 1, it gets a red flag. If it's below 1, it gets a green flag. For qualitative risk characterization, in order to make the tool understand that the risk is considered controlled by the assessor, then there is what we call a risk control flag to be set. So you need to check a box, but of course you should only do that. It will set the icon to green, but you should only do that once you have checked that the conditions indeed ensure safe use and that you have provided explanation on the risk characterization. There is nevertheless a specific case where the tool can help. It's for local effect on skin and eye, and I will demonstrate it later after the break for the workers' assessment, where the concentration, the risk can be controlled by the concentration in the mixture, meaning that there is a concentration limit which is set in box 1 in the hazard conclusion and scope of assessment tab. And if the concentration in the mixture at the contributing scenario level is below this concentration limit, the tool will automatically understand that the risk is considered control and set a green flag. So that's the way it looks like. So you see on the left all the various routes and type of effect for workers. On the top, you see the risk characterization well, there is a risk characterization ratio column here, and you can see that the risk characterization ratio is below 1, so you have a green flag. Then you have the routes for which you have a qualitative risk characterization needed, so for inhalation. And here I have set manually the flag so that the tool understands that it's control. There has been some explanation that you can provide in this blue cloud. But for the local dermal effect for eyes and here and for eye, you can see there is no checkbox because the tool automatically understood that the risk is controlled because it was controlled by concentration. As a very last on the assessment, the environmental assessment for aggregated sources. So as you probably know, for the environment assessment, there is a need to assess the risk from all the sources, the different uses for the substance. So the regional assessment takes into account all the sources, so all the uses. And there is a default which is calculated by uses, which is what most of you will probably do. But there is also the possibility to use other data sets, for example, measured data, which can be used either as main data or as supportive information. There is also the assessment for widespread uses, and this is the local assessment for all widespread uses. This is done automatic with uses in Chesar 3, and it's read-only, so nothing to be done by the user except checking that indeed the risk is properly controlled. So this was the part on the introduction on the assessment. As said, later on you will have a demo, but before that I will go a bit on the Chesar library. So the Chesar 3 library, I will do also a bit of an intro with the slides, and then I will demonstrate. So the principle, the library in Chesar is accessed by clicking the box 6 icon, and it enables you to manage, meaning importing, searching, creating chemical safety assessment elements which can be used in any assessment. There is no major changes between Chesar 2.3 and Chesar 3 in the library. The only changes is some changes the data structure for SPERCs and 2 new types of condition of use. So what are there are 3 types of chemical safety elements in the library. The one is condition of use templates, which were previously called determinant types in Chesar 2. They are a set of information which are systematically characterizing a condition of use. So it includes metadata, which helps for the functioning of the tool. SPERCs are specific environmental release categories. They describe specific conditions of use and the corresponding release estimates to water, to air, to soil, and waste. SCEDs are specific consumer exposure determinants, and they inform on habits and practices on how consumer actually uses the products, as well as assumptions on the product design that can influence the assessment. They are used primarily with Tier 1 exposure models such as ESETOC Tier A. And as Andreas already introduced at the beginning, SPERCs and SCEDs are typically developed by downstream users, sector association, to enable the refinement of exposure assessment. There is also standard phrases in the library. Standard phrases, they are provided in catalogs to facilitate the exchange of information in the safety data sheet. The use of standard phrases supports the harmonization of communication, and it also enables the translation into local languages. I don't know if you are aware, but ESCOM is a catalog of standard phrases which is developed by the European chemical industry, and it's available in Chesar format at the following link on CEFIC website. It's also available in Chesar website on the library. And we would advise you before starting, after having installed Chesar, to import the ESCOM catalog. And when the ESCOM catalog is updated, more or less every 6 months, you can update your library with the new release. The library items can have 3 different status. They can be draft, meaning that they cannot be used in any assessment nor be exported. They can be active, or they can be obsolete, meaning that they are still valid in the existing assessments, but they can not longer be selected. So, where do these elements in the library come from? The conditions of use templates in the library have the following origin. They can be available by default in the Chesar 3 library. So these are called the built-in conditions of use. I talked about that already. They could have been imported as such or as part of SPERCs or use maps. So as CSA blocks, as Andreas has shown in box 2, when being created by a sector association. Or they could have been imported as part of assessments created by other Chesar users when importing a Chesar substance or Chesar CSA. They can also, when needed, be created by the assessor themselves. SPERCs and SCEDs are in principle created by sector associations, so assessors only need to import and use them. And even if assessors import the use maps, they are automatically imported in the library, so there is no need to import them as such. And only users who have been assigned to a legal entity and with the role of library manager in box 7 can create elements in this box. So what are the assessors' interaction with the library? In most cases, assessors do not need to manage the element in their library. In particular, no need to create anything. But there are a few situations where the assessor can take some, what I would call easy actions in the library. So import and update the phrase catalog, import SCEDs and SPERCs if they exist in Chesar format, but they have not been integrated in use maps by sectors, potentially print SPERCs or SCEDs reports, equivalent to fact sheet, for what you have in the library to get an overview, and potentially import sets of conditions of use provided by sectors or eventually by tool owners, all the input to certain tools. In some, hopefully more exceptional cases, the assessor have to create themselves the elements in the library. It can be specific conditions of use which are relevant for their assessment and which do not exist in the library, and I will demonstrate how to do that. Or it can be standardized files in Chesar format are not yet available, although they exist in Word file, for example, for SPERCs and SCEDs existing in Word file, but not yet in Chesar format. So, further information. To best support the assessor, we would like to contribute to the development of the collection and the development of the library items to support the assessors, and we will put those elements on the Chesar webpage. These may be sets of conditions of use relevant for the exposure estimation tools, and this may be sector-specific conditions of use, which will also be available on the ECHA webpage on use maps. I will now go for a short demo. So here you have the Chesar library, box 6 is clicked here. The standard phrases are available, and you can import easily the file that you can find on Chesar website in the library section. Very soon there will be also a new version available on CEFIC website. You will have the SCEDs or the SPERCs. They are identical elements. In principle, the only thing you may have to do probably is to import them, if not part of a use map. Potentially, if you want, you can just create a SPERC report. I'll just show you. So it's just to have in a Word version the information which is in the SPERC. So that's easier to read. Sorry, I probably clicked twice. And in exceptional case, or if it's not done by sector, you may have to create a SPERCs or SCED, and sector association will have to do it. So if you create, you have to for sure provide some identifiers. So I will just very quickly show you. These are mandatory fields. So if I want to go on, so SPERC code and SPERC titles, then you have some identifiers on the scope, the description of the activity, process, the lifecycle stage, the chemical product category, sector of use if you want. Then you can add conditions of use. It will be the same as in the assessment. So you select new conditions of use that should be in the library. And then report, release, estimates. And you can save your SPERC. It will be in your library. As long as it's not made active, it's a draft here, it cannot be used. But to make it active, I need to really fill a number of information. I will not spend too much time on this because this is something that hopefully sectors will do and not single assessors. Now the conditions of use. This is the smallest element in the library because they are used in SPERCs, in SCEDs, in use maps everywhere. So this is very important. As you can see, although my database is pretty empty, I already have quite a lot. I already have 60. So it may be useful sometimes if you want to search for something to go to the advanced search and to see a bit more what you need. When you want to create one, so I will create one. What I will create a condition of use for the environment, which is about on-site exhaust air incineration, which is a risk management measure with 99% effectiveness for my case. So I would select the type is a risk management measure with effectiveness. It is for the environment. It goes under the heading in the exposure scenario, technical and organizational measure. It's not for consumer. It's about air, it impacts on air. All these metadata are helpful later on for the selection. And I will type its name now. It's on-site exhaust air incineration. If I want, I can provide more explanation for the CSR about what is meant by this. I think my default value is 99%, but I know that for some substance it may be useful to have different values. So I will say it's between 80 and 100%, and I can explain here how I estimate the effectiveness and why it may be changed for different substances. Then it needs to be communicated to the downstream users, so to be put part of the exposure scenario for communication. So by default, each time this condition of use will be used in a CSR, I need to say whether I want to include it also in the exposure scenario for communication. In this case, yes. And then I need to provide how should I want to communicate. If I put exhaust air, trying to find a standard phrase. Actually, I can't find the phrase which I need at the moment, so I will not use a phrase for the moment. I will use free text field, free text, which is not ideal because in the ESCOM XML this will not be transported, but maybe I can submit a phrase to ESCOM group to have a better phrase for my assessment later on. So I will say on-site exhaust air incineration. If I want, I can provide more information. This is really for the assessor, meaning this is information which stays in the library. For example, some description, if I want to be able to retrieve my condition of use later on, or to say to which exposure estimation tool it is valid. And I would suggest that if this is the case, you use the standard phrase. A number of them are in the ESCOM catalog because then it's standardized to search it. And then I can activate my phrase because I want to make it useful for assessment and also potentially to export it. So I will activate it. Once it's activated, I cannot be changed apart from the information related to the communication. So it's here, meaning that if I look in my library now, for example, so I can look for it. Yes, it's here. It has been saved. It is active, etc. And I can, if I want to have a look, I can edit it. Most of it is read-only, but I can change my, if in the next version of the catalog there is a phrase for it, I can then change my phrase here, include the new phrase from the catalog, and this will have an impact on all my future exposure scenario for communication. Now I will show you that there are different types of condition of use. In fact, there are 5 types of conditions of use. They can be quantitative. So for example, here, the annual use amount is quantitative, meaning, what you can imagine. There is a qualifier, a unit, a default value, min, max value. Sorry. It can be qualitative. So for example, eye protection, it's only a phrase. So eye protection, wear chemical resistant, can't remember what it was, face shield, goggles, or safety glasses. So this is only somehow a phrase. It can be what we call qualitative grouped. Just an example, the body part potentially exposed. Here you have many possibilities, so it's a kind of pick list. So that's why we call it qualitative group. This is mainly useful when these are inputs to tools where you have different options. It can be an RMM with effectiveness, so we have seen that with the on-site exhaust air incineration. And it can also be an RMM with effectiveness group. So for example, thermal protection, there are different types of gloves in the tier A, so with different level of effectiveness. So this is what is called qualitative grouped, because these are prefixed. It could be, as I've shown, that you have for an RMM with effectiveness a default value and a range, and the assessor can change the effectiveness of the risk management measure, but it can be, in this case, there is a number of prefix values, so a pick list. So I have now demonstrated the functionalities of the library. Sorry. We will now have a short break for 10 minutes, meaning that we will start again at our time 11:40. And we will start with 3 demonstrations on the assessment with the tools. So thank you. Stay connected, and we'll see you in 10 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Stefano Frattini, and I would like to show you how to perform environmental assessment in Chesar 3.0 by means of different examples. First example cover the on-site assessment, namely the own manufacturing site, which is in most of the case the case. And the scenario for your assessment is defined by the following elements. A total tonnage of 320 tons is processed in one single site. Releases to air from the site are sent to a non-site incineration unit with an effectiveness of at least 99%. Releases to water from the site, so meaning before the biological STP, are measured in terms of concentration of the substance and flow rates where datasets are available and are equal to 0.1 kilogram per day. And in the biological STP to which the site is connected to, the sludge is sent to an incinerator, so therefore is not applied to agricultural soil. We go to Chesar, and we select the environmental contributing scenario for the manufacturing site. And what we can see here is that all the built-in conditions of use are pre-filled, meaning the amount used, the biological STP setting, and the receiving flow surface water flow rate. Also, the releases are already pre-filled, being calculated by the default ERC release factor based on ERC. So, first of all, we have said that in your assessment, the amount is entirely processed in one side, so the amount is already fine for your assessment. And we have said that we are able to limit the release to air by a risk management measure because your exhaust air ventilation is connected to an on-site incineration. Then you have to, add a condition of use, which is an on-site exhaust air incineration. You select it, that you have already created in your library, and then with the effectiveness of 99%, as you can see, this effectiveness has an impact on the release estimation, which is to air, which is lowered by a factor of 100. And this, of course, has an impact also on the exposure estimation. For the second thing, we have said that the release to water before the biological STP are measured and are equal to 0.1 kilogram per day. So you select your method as being measured release rate. You insert your site-specific name, and you enter the value already in the release rate format, so 0.1 kilogram per day. As you can see, the release factor is calculated directly from your release rate. And you have also to provide the proper justification. In this case, probably you have to provide justification on the data set that you have used for calculating this measured release rate. And of course, you need also to provide the relevant condition of use which are behind this very low release rate. In this case, you have already prepared in the library your condition of use, which is no water used in the process or maintenance cleaning operation. You select this, and you have uploaded in your on your condition of use tab. Then we have said that the site is connected to a biological STP, which does not have any application of the sludge to agricultural soil because the sludge is sent to an incinerator. For applying this condition of use, you have to set your biological STP to a site-specific, and then to say that the application of the STP sludge on agricultural soil is equal to no. This, of course, has an impact on the calculation of the exposure estimation, mainly for the agricultural soil. Then you can go down, revise your assessment, and also check the exposure estimation with your condition of use, and check also the risk characterization ratio related, if a PNEC exists. And also you can check the risk characterization in the risk characterization tab, where you can also check what type of the risk risk characterization you have, quantitative, qualitative, or not needed. So Now we are going to present a second case. Is an assessment of a generic site down in the supply chain, in this case the formulation stage. The assessment at the formulation stage is characterized by the following information elements. This information may come, for example, from a downstream user survey by the registrant. A maximum tonnage of the substance being processed at the site is equal to 100 tons a year, equal to 0.5 tons a day. Expected standard good practice includes that the water used for equipment or drums cleaning is treated as a waste and sent to an off-site incineration, not applied, is sent to an off-site incineration. And the workshop cleaning, mainly for the floor cleaning, is sent to a wastewater stream, which is connected to a municipal biological STP. There are no SPERC covering the case you are after. However, the OECD emission scenario document for coating describes similar cases and provides a reliable release estimation to water, including those coming from the workshop cleaning and air, which depends on the substance properties, in this case, the boiling point. Then you go to your assessment. You select the related environmental contributing scenario. You first adjust the amount, because we say that from the survey we have 0.5 tons per day equivalent to 100 tons per year. The STP setting is fine, and this is standard for the generic site, as usually is. And then you have to check the release estimation. We say that the release estimation are based, in this case, on the estimated release factor coming from literature. In particular, you are using the OECD emission scenario document. We have said for the water, the release to water is limited to the workshop cleaning, which is 0.05%, as it is in the OECD document, emission scenario document. And of course, here you have to put the relevant justification, probably coming from the OECD scenario document, and why, explaining why your case is covered by this emission scenario document. You put the justification here. Of course, then you don't have to forget to also insert the condition of use which are behind this release factor. As we have said before, we assume that the cleaning of drums and equipment is collected as a waste. Therefore, you have to add the relevant condition of use you have created in your library or imported in your library. In this case, is collect water from equipment drums cleaning as a waste. You select it, and you will have it in your contributing scenario in the condition of use tab. Then you carry on your assessment with air, with estimated release factor, which comes from, for example, the OECD. In this case, it's based on the boiling point. You check the boiling point of your substance. You check in this emission scenario document that is the release factor to air is equal to 0.6. Again, here you have to provide the relevant justification. And in this case, you don't have to provide any further condition of use because this is based on the substance properties. And then you have completed your assessment and you can check the risk characterization ratio that by chance are just below 1 and the exposure concentration. And you can do that for the risk characterization also in the risk characterization tab. Okay, now we are showing the last example, which cover an assessment of a generic industrial site. In this case, you as assessor, you have to assess an industrial use of coatings which covers the water-based process. In example, where wet scrubber are used for the collection and the management of the overspray. In this case, a spray have been developed by sector organization, example the automotive sector, to cover such cases. And they are directly used in the assessment of the industrial use as being imported through the use map developed by the same sector. So, in Chesar, you go to your the related environmental contributing scenario, which is a water-based scrubbing process. You see that since you have already imported this as a use map, and the use map contained already this perk, this perk is already reported in your assessment. What you have in the condition of use, you have all the conditions of use which are related to the SPERC. Some of them are modifiable, the amounts, the STP setting, and the river flow rate. Some of them are not modifiable at all, in the sense that they are related to the SPERC and they are strictly connected to the release estimation, so you cannot change them. In this case, you know that you have some even message here that coming from the SPERC. They say that the SPERC applies to a maximum daily use amount of 1 tons per day of coating. Of course, you know that your substance is present in the coating mixture up to 2%. Then you are able to change and justify the amount of your substance used at the generic site. Doing that, you can put a new concentration, a new the 2% of your substance, then you have 0.02 tons per day, and you have to adjust also the annual amount. The rest of the condition of use are fine for you because as being a generic site, you apply the standard biological STP to that. You also see that the release factor are already provided by the SPERC together with the related justification, and you cannot change them. And then you can check your exposure estimation and the risk characterization ratio that you have as a result of the use of the SPERC in your assessment. So this was the last case I wanted to show you. Now I would like to give the floor to Hélène for the worker assessment.
Thanks, Stefano. So what I will do now is to present the workers' exposure assessment as a demo. So I will go first through quantitative exposure estimation, in particular with a lot on the acetic workers, because we are aware that most of the registrations have been made using the asset TRA, and showing how it can be used by default for the full life cycle. Then I will illustrate how to edit the conditions of use, either one by one or in a bulk edit mode. Then illustrate a specific case of a contributing scenario taking place at elevated temperature. I will also show how to use other tools. I have a case here with a Stoffen manager-based exposure assessment, and then illustrate qualitative assessment, the generic case, and the specific case of local effect for skin and eye. So here we are in Chesar box 3, and I need to do the assessment for the workers, so I need to click on a contributing scenario for workers, whichever. And as you will see, there is the default plugged-in condition of use, which I mentioned earlier, and there is no exposure data set, nothing. So it's the starting point for the assessment for each contributing scenario. Now, what I would like to do is to include by default a TRA-based exposure data set for all the contributing scenario, because at the moment for workers, the conditions of use can either be included manually by adding conditions of use one by one, and because the SWEDs are not yet implemented, and the SWEDs are not yet fully developed by the sectors association. This will be available as a new functionality in the next Chesar version. So what do? I have to go to this button, I add default exposure data set, and I select the TRA workers. Takes a bit of time because for all the contributing scenario, it creates a TRA workers assessment, meaning that the conditions of use which are relevant for the TRA are set in here with default values, meaning 100% of the substance, 8 hours, basic general ventilation, no local exhaust ventilation, no PPE. And then the exposure estimates provided by the TRA workers, and the risk characterization ratio. So that's the starting point. Now, what do I want to do? I want to potentially modify the conditions of use. For example, here I take for the formulation, receiving and charging of the substance. In fact, here I have an exposure estimate which is high with a risk characterization ratio for inhalation of 2.5, but I know that this contributing scenario takes place with local exhaust ventilation, which I changed to yes, and with thermal protection. And you have seen I've included the local exhaust ventilation and the gloves, and the risk characterization, the exposure and the risk characterization ratio has been recalculated, and now it's below 1. I will show you another way of changing the conditions of use, we call the bulk way, which may be useful in some cases. It's not connected to the TRA, but nevertheless. For example, in my case, I know that the substance is then formulated, and after formulation, it is not 100% in the products, but it's 2% in the mixtures. So I can select any of the contributing activity after it has been using the formulated product. And here I see for the moment it's 100%, but I want to do a bulk edit. So I go to this icon, which is called bulk actions. I click on it and I click bulk edit. At the moment, the tool tells me for all the contributing activity, I have this value. So it selects automatically all the contributing activity which have this value for this condition of use. I don't want to change it for all. I don't want to change it for manufacturer. I don't want to change it for the receiving contributing activity for the formulation, nor for the mixing, nor for the cleaning. But I can change it for the transfer after it has been formulated, and I can change it for my use at industrial site, my professional use. And I want to change it to 2%. Potentially, I provide an explanation. I save it. So it has been changed in all of them. I will leave the bulk edit mode. I can show you here it has been changed in this contributing activity, but if I select whichever else, it's also changed. So that's how to do a bulk addition of a condition of use value. Now we'll show you a specific case of assessment using the TRA. I select this contributing activity, which in fact is about drying, so it's at elevated temperature. So I need to change in the condition of use the operating temperature. It's not 40, it's in my case 70. And the exposure estimate is such that for inhalation it's very high. Well, it's high, risk characterization ratio is above 1. But I need to be aware that when I change the temperature, the TRA does it selects automatically the highest volatility band for estimating the inhalation exposure, which is not what I want, because the highest volatility band is as if the substance had a vapor pressure of more than 10,000 Pascal. But in my case, I know that my vapor pressure at 70 degrees is 300 Pascal. So I want to change that. How should I do it? In fact, I need to edit my TRA workers dataset. So I need to go here, and you see that there is a kind of hyperlink. So I click on my TRA workers, and I get to my edit dataset view. I will see the various routes for which I have an exposure estimate. I see the various input parameters, so conditions of use for the TRA, which I can change. And then I have a section which is new compared to Chesar 2, which is called TRA workers specific parameter. And I can see that I have the vapor pressure at the operating temperature has been estimated by, it's automated to put it to the highest volatility band, but I want to change it. So I will overwrite it, and I will change it to 300. I don't do any other change. I save it, and fortunately, this is even sufficient to put my exposure estimates lower, and my risk characterization is now fine. Just to show you other parameters which can be changed like this, if I edit again my TRA data set, not for this case, but in case you want to say that the local exhaust ventilation is also effective for the dermal route, or in case, for example, for low volatile substance that you want to limit the exposure to the saturated vapor concentration, you can set it here, and you better provide some explanation why you think that in your case it is valid. For example, that no mist, no aerosol is formed during the use. This is just on how to use the detailed functionalities for the TRA workers. Just to show you something else, for example, if I had the cleaning of equipment, which is now characterized with a PROC 28, and I realize I have no exposure estimates, but I can't remember why. Just clicking the Validate Assessment button, which, as I said already, is more about informing on plugged-in tools, I'm told why the TRA workers cannot predict exposure for this PROC selection. When you have this case that you don't have exposure estimate or something strange, just click the button. It will tell you, for example, if you have forgotten to provide some input parameters, or if some combination are not covered by the tool. For example, as you probably all know, and it's well written in the ESETOC guidance, the TRA does not support the exposure estimation for solid in liquid mixture. Now, I will go to the use of other tools. So, for example, if I select this contributing activity, which is about the use by professionals by roller application or brushing of my paint, we are always talking about the same example that Andreas introduced at the beginning. In fact, I have an exposure estimate which is too high, but I don't have any means to really change. Yes, there will be gloves, for sure, but for the respiratory route, there is no way. No, the professional worker will not use a local ventilation, exhaust ventilation, and he will not use a respiratory protection. Nevertheless, what I have done, I have gone through my case, and I tried to assess it with Stoffen Manager. And it happens that in Stoffen Manager, for the relevant condition of use, my exposure estimate is around 6 milligram per cubic meter. So my risk characterization ratio will be below 1. So I want to make use of this assessment instead of the TRA. So what I will do now, I will remove my exposure estimates for the TRA because I'm not interested in this for the inhalation route, and I will include a new data set. So first, to remove the inhalation exposure for the TRA, I go here and I remove it. I save it. Then no exposure estimate for the inhalation route. And I want to add an exposure data set by an external tool, which is in fact Stoffen Manager. Click here, version 4.5. And it's only for the inhalation route long term. So I will get it here. I will put it's in fact 668. Now I need to identify the conditions of use which have led to this exposure estimate. What I have at the moment, I have in the condition of use section the full list of conditions of use which are in my contributing scenario at the moment. I can see which of them are linked to the TRI workers' estimates. And at the moment, I remind you that only the TRI workers' dermal is taken into account. So I have the full list here. What I can do is already see among those lists which have an impact on Stoffen Manager. The percentage has an impact on the Stoffen Manager. I do this on the basis of the the Stoffen Manager report, which I have carried out outside. The duration of the activity. I know from the Stoffen Manager guidance that it's assessed for indoor use and that the operating temperature plays a role because I have entered my vapor pressure in Stoffen Manager. None of the other conditions of use plays a role, but I'm missing a number of conditions of use which play a role in Stoffen Manager, so I need to add them. Fortunately, what I did before, I imported in my library the list of conditions of use relevant for Stoffen Manager, which I found maybe one day on the Chesar library. We are working on it. So I can look for those. Stoffen Manager, for example. I will have, yes, I find the list of conditions of use here, which are relevant for Stoffen Manager. And in this version of Chesar, I have to include them one by one, those which are relevant according to my test report from Stoffen Manager. So I select one, for example, the distance to the source, and I will see it is included here. It's by default link. I can check that I have the right value according to my test report, and then I can go again, and I have my selection is kept. I have to take another one according to my test report and do the same. And I should include all of those conditions of use which are from my test report. I will then save my exposure data set, and as you can see, Stoffen Manager is now used, and I have the exposure estimates, and my risk characterization ratio is fine. Fortunately, in the future, instead of doing all this, you can import your Stoffen Manager assessment directly. It was actually possible in Chesar 2 for Stoffen Manager. It's not yet possible in Chesar 3, but we are working with them so that they can adapt their format to a Chesar 3 format. The same can be done in other case. Instead of adding a tool, you just add measure data set. You will have to do the same. You add exposure estimates, related conditions of use, etc. What I probably need to do now is to go back to my conditions of use, so to my contributing scenario, and see what I have. If you click on this small icon, you can see which of the conditions of use are linked to the exposure data set. And for example, the percentage of the substance in the mixture is linked to the Stoffen Manager and to the TR workers, meaning it's used as input. If I would try to delete this, I would get a message. It would tell me that if I delete this condition of use, it deletes my exposure data set as well. So I don't want to do it. So all of those conditions of use are linked to one of my exposure data sets, so I better not remove them. Nevertheless, I have some conditions of use which are here because they were here before when I had the inhalation exposure estimates by the TI workers, for example, respiratory protection. So I can delete it to clean my contributing scenario. So now I'm done with the quantitative assessment. Of course, I have not gone through all my contributing scenario. This takes a bit too much time. And you will see that in the risk characterization, for those for which I had done the risk characterization, the quantitative assessment, it's green. Oops, I've done something too quick. Yes, I will show you another one, sorry. And for those routes for which there is a qualitative risk characterization, because my substance is a mild irritant for dermal and for eye, and it is assumed as being also a mild irritant for inhalation in absence of information, I need to carry out my qualitative risk characterization. So to do that, two ways, as I explained in the general presentation before. Either I should click the standard case is to click here, and maybe I will take even another contributing scenario. Let's use the contributing scenario, which is about manufacturing in closed system. I know that in this case, for example, I have no contact to dermal and eye, so I click on my qualitative risk characterization. I think it's control. I don't need to have any additional measure, and I say no dermal contact, no contact to eyes. Not very well phrased. I save it. So I can see here that I have an explanation. It's the same here, so I don't need to change my justification. And for I already put the justification here, so I don't need to change it. So you can see that the flag is changing from green from red to green, and here I can see already my existing justification. To save a bit of time, I will not explain my approach for inhalation because I want to show you it's the same. The principle is the same. I will show you other methods. So there could be cases where, for example, for discharging and discharging, I have the same, that I need to control my risk characterization. And what I know is that I need to control it by the PPE. And I know that I have a number of contributing scenarios where I have 100%, and for those I need to have gloves and I need to have dermal protection. So I will use, I will select some of those contributing scenarios. So this is, for example, the mixing. I want to put the gloves, dermal protection, but I think maybe I should do it for a number of contributing activity in one go. So for which of them? Not all of them. So I will start from blank. I want to do it for all the contributing scenario, which were with 100%. I did this before, and which require then gloves. I will put it to change it to yes. I will save it. So now for all these contributing activities, I have my gloves, which are set up. And I know that I also need an eye protection, and I want to add it to all of them in one go. So eye protection, it's here. I select it. So now I have also an eye protection for those 6 contributing scenarios. It's saved. And I want in one go to say, okay, my qualitative risk characterization is okay for the eye. So it's click, and for the dermal local. And potentially, I explain why. I say PP included controlling the risk. And this is also done for my 6 contributing scenarios, which are selected. So if I go back, I leave the bulk edit mode. In any of them, if I go to the risk characterization tab, it's all there. And you can see that the justification is here, coming here, which you can also edit if you want to change it here. Now, last situation, again for local dermal effect and eye effect is the case where I have a low concentration. So when it's 2%. In fact, I had already in my box 1 on the hazard conclusion and scope of assessment for the workers, I have included that with 10%, in principle with an explanation, I can explain that if the concentration is below this limit, there is no local effect on eye, on dermal, on skin, nor on eye expected. And I will see that for all my contributing scenario where my conditions of use is below, then the tool has already set up for me the green flag for the local and the eye effect, so I have nothing to do. So with this, I will end my demonstration on the workers' assessment and leave the floor to Stefano, who will demonstrate the consumer assessment. Thank you.
Okay, good morning again. In this presentation, I would like to show you how to perform the consumer assessment in Chesar 3 by means of different cases. For example, covering the case where the condition of use are based on TRA subcategories, and we make use of TRA Consumer 3.1 for the exposure estimation, where the condition of use are based on SCADs, and we make use of TRA Consumer 3.1 for the exposure estimation, and where we have to make use of external tool, for example, Consexpo, for exposure estimation. In the first case, I would like to show you how to make use of TRA subcategories. So we go to the consumer contributing scenario we would like to assess, in this case a waterborne paint, roller and brusher application. We select it, and then we selected that our assessment, consumer assessment, is based on TRA consumer or consumer product article subcategory. Then we are prompted to select the relevant subcategory. Only those subcategories which are relevant for PC9A, which is being assessed, will be shown to the user. In this case, we are covering a waterborne latex wall paint. Then we select these subcategories. When we select this subcategory, all the conditions of use related to this TRA subcategory are shown in your screen. Some of them are editable. Some of them are not editable at all. You cannot change them. These largely reflect the ESETOC TRA Consumer T1 version, where some of the input parameters are editable, some are not. So you can change, for example, the concentration of your substance in the mixture is only 1%. Then, to complete your assessment, you need to add the exposure estimation tool, which is, in this case, the TRA Consumer 3.1. Then you are prompted to the exposure data set. By default, the roots type of effects covered by the ESETOC TRA Consumer are selected, as well as the condition of use that you may change also here. You save it, and you have your assessment done, in the sense that you have the exposure estimation for the routes you have selected and the risk characterization ratio when a DINEL is available. A similar case, very similar, is when you have a SCAD available for your substance, for the use you want to cover. For example, in the adhesive sector, you say you know that there are SCADs available, and you have already imported these SCADs in your library, for example, from the sector organization. You base then your condition of use on SCADs. If SCADs are available for this product category, this will be shown in your when you try to select the SCAD. You can check the name of the SCAD and the product activities covered by the SCAD. If they are fine, so they are actually covering the consumer contributing scenario you are after, you can select them. When you have selected them, all the condition of use coming and the justification coming from the SCADs are reported in your condition of use tab. You cannot change them. In practice, you cannot change any of the condition of use and the justification coming from the SCAD, but the percentage of the substance in mixture and article. This is the only condition of use you can change in your condition of use tab. If you use a SCAD, you can change them because you know that the concentration of the substance in the mixture is 1%. Again, for completing your assessment, you have to select the exposure tool you want to use. In this case, TRA Consumer Tree 1. Again, you are prompted to the exposure dataset where the route and the type of effects covered by SE.TRA are shown, and where the condition of use are also shown, and they are, as well, as said before, not editable at all. You can save them, and then you have your assessment done. You can check your exposure estimation and the risk characterization ratio as well. Then I would like to show you the last case where you don't have TRA subcategory and SCADs available, or you cannot make use of them because they do not ensure the safe use of the substance. Therefore, you have to use external tools, external reference. In this case, you have to add an external tool. As you can see here, there is already a functionality for importing external tool dataset. ECA is currently working with RIVM for preparing specification for a Chesar exporting file in Consexpo. Once implemented by RIVM, it will be possible to import Consexpo-based assessment, which means condition of use, exposure estimation, remarks for exposure, from Chesar file created in Consexpo directly. For the time being, for adding an external tool, you have to do it manually and to add external tool. You select the tool, Consexpo, and the version, for one, for example. You select the route of exposure and type of effects, in this case, the long-term systemic, and then you provide the concentration coming from Consexpo, for example. And then, of course, you need to add the condition of use for which your assessment in Consexpo is based on. To add them, you need to have it in your library. ECA will soon make available condition of use needed for a Consexpo-based assessment on Chesar website. At that time, you can download them and use them for a Consexpo-based assessment. Imagine that you have uploaded already from the Chesar website those condition of use. You can search them by a keyword, Consexpo, for example, and you have it here in your library. As mentioned before by Hélène, you have to select one by one, but in Chesar 3.0, but in Chesar 3.1 will be probably possible to select multiple in one go. You select one, for example. When selecting the condition of use, you have to be careful to select those conditions of use which are relevant for the sub-model that you have used in Consexpo, for instance. You can select and also change the value of your condition of use. Again, Consexpo. And for example, thermal contact rate. And you put the right value. You save it. Before saving, you have to provide also explanation on exposure estimation. This explanation will be related to the, for example, to the exposure estimation you have taken from the Consexpo and that you have used for your assessment. Or you may want to insert here other Consexpo input parameters which are not condition of use and then are not reported in the condition of use tab, but nevertheless they are needed to conclude your Consexpo based assessment. You save it and you have, as you see, your assessment done here, and in terms of exposure estimation and the risk characterization ratio. To conclude, I would like to give you a final remark that Chesar 3.0 is not yet in line with the R15 guidance on consumer exposure in relation to the calculation of the daily exposure estimation. In practice, in this case, R15 guidance provides assessment factors to be used for averaging the event exposure and to get the daily exposure, and for infrequent use, where the R15 guidance foresees the use of short-term DINEL for the risk characterization. This feature will be implemented in Chesar 3.1. Thanks, and I would like to give the floor to Roberta Bernasconi for the export to Euclid and the generation of the CSR.
Thank you, Stefano. And this is my last bit for explaining you how to report in a consistent way, in a consistent and transparent way, the outcome of your chemical safety assessment in a CSR, so in a chemical safety report. To do so, you need again the communication with Euclid and the synchronization of the data. Because of course the result of the other assessment and the result of the exposure assessment should be in line. So I will present you the functionality available in box 4 of Chesar 3. And the first thing to be done is really the export of the uses created in box 2 of Chesar to Euclid. So basically the export is very, very easy. So I will use the same substance that you have seen today in our webinar, so this ECA substance. These are the list, this is the list of the uses available. And in box 4, I will export them to Euclid. The first thing, again, to make clear is that you have to have Euclid running at the same time in order to have the communication via web service effective. So if you click on the export uses to Euclid, you are confronted with this message, which is a bit difficult. So we will go through it together in order to make it clear. So the message says, remove all uses from Euclid identified as use assessed in a known CSR. So here there are some concept that has to be clear before proceeding. So in Euclid, for example, in my ECA substance, I have the section 3.5, in which I have already defined for the manufacturing two uses. One is for the joint submission, and one is for my own, it's my own use. And the difference between the two, and for this demonstration, is that I have, for example, for the joint, I have set that the related assessment is this one. So I choose the peak list in Euclid 6, use assessed as a joint CSR. For the other one, I did the same, meaning that I filled in some information, but in this case, this is used only as an own CSR. I'm explaining all of this because Chesar, while synchronizing the uses with Euclid, is really asking you if you want to overwrite all the uses which have the same flag, for example, own uses, in order to have a consistent own CSR. If I click the box, all the uses considered marked as own will be removed. Let's try together. So I will click OK. Okay, so I get the message, the green message from Chesar. Now I will have to go back to Euclid, but I will have to change the view because Euclid has to be refreshed. Let's say I will re-click on the substance. Now I will open my expand all. So I will go to my section 3, and as you can see, now I have all the uses coming from Chesar, plus the use which I had before indicating as joint, because of course joint was not the same flag, let's say. So the use in Euclid was not having the same flag as the one that I wanted to overwrite. So in my case, so let's see the manufacturing, which is easy. So in Chesar 3, I have the manufacturer, which is this one. And the information available in these fields of Chesar 3 are reported one-to-one to Euclid. And by the way, as this substance has been already assessed, in the tab Contributing Scenario for the Environment in Euclid, I have the conditions of use available from the assessment done in Chesar. The same, it happens for the condition of use for the workers. So just to go back, I will show you also that here we have the contributing activity for the environment, which is ERC1, with the same name. Sorry, okay, here it is. And then if I scroll down, I have the closed manufacturing process, PROC1, and then the PROC8A, maintenance and cleaning operation. So this was for the transfer of uses. So you have really the life cycle 3, which is reproduced in Euclid 6, with some information on the assessment. So my CSA is at the moment own, meaning that here I have the name own CSR, and the fact that you can change the own CSR to joint CSA, own CSA to joint CSA by doing it from the CSA management. Then in box 4. Once you have synchronized the uses, you can go and generate the CSR. Chesar and Euclid are cooperating in generating the CSR, meaning that from Chesar you can generate the full CSR, meaning the full document from part B, from section 1 to 10. Now you get the confirmation message, so you just have to click OK, because we did already synchronize the users, but in case it's just a reminder for you to get to know, because of course in case the users are not synchronized, then the section 2 and the section 9 of your CSR will not be aligned. So I notified this, and now Chesar is generating the full CSR. Now let's see if my system is working correctly. Here it is, so I want to open it, and here it is. So now I have my full CSR. As you can see from the table of content, I have the part A, which is defined in Euclid section 13, and the part B, with all the information from the hazard assessment, as well as now I'm coming to the exposure assessment and the related risk characterization in section 9, for section 9 and 10, as generated by Chesar. Now I can close this document, and I want just to point out that before generating the CSR, the full CSR, you might want to add some information on the section 9.0, which is something, so in general the CSR from Chesar, generated from Chesar, is respecting the headlines indicated, the structure indicated in the Annex 1 of the REACH regulation, with the exception of section 9.0, in which you can put some information as the overview of uses and exposed scenarios, the introduction to the assessment for the environment, for the workers and consumers. In Chesar 3.0, so this version of Chesar, you can edit information related to these sections in order to have it printed in the final CSR. Having said that, of course, as a last word, you might want even to generate only the section 9 and 10 for whatever reason, in order to visualize what is the outcome of the safety assessment. And with that, I'm concluding my demonstration, and I'll give the floor to my colleague Hélène, which will demonstrate you the last box of Euclid, which is the box 5, and the exposed scenario for communication. Thank you.
So we'll just now quickly go through the last part of this presentation, the exposure scenario for communication, how it is in Chesar. Just a few principles. So the idea is that the exposure scenario for communication, which is to be annexed then into the SDS, the safety data sheet, is based on the exposure scenario for the chemical safety report, that they are consistent. It contains, the exposure scenario for communication contains a table of content, which is based on so-called structured short titles. And it contains, for each exposure scenario contains 4 sections: a title section, a section on conditions of use, a section on exposure estimation, and a section with additional guidance for downstream user. This all takes place in box 5, and it enables the generation of the exposure scenario in an RTF version, so it's mainly for print somehow. In the future, it will be possible to generate the exposure scenario also in an ESCOM XML format. So again, you can see more information on the ESCOM XML, together with information on the ESCOM phrases. It's an ESCOM project as a whole on the CEFIC webpage. I will now show it. So we are in box 5, and the idea is to generate the exposure scenario for communication. In fact, if the work has been done previously properly, you nearly have nothing to do. You just click the generate exposure scenario. So in Chesar, it's called, to make it shorter, SDS-ES. And the only thing you have to decide is whether you want to include all your exposure scenario in it. That's the first choice. And the second is whether you want to include, it's not very explicit, our heading, the exposure scenario subheading, meaning that in the section 2 on the conditions of use, whether you want to see the various exposure scenario subheading or whether you want to make it shorter, so removing the ES subheading. So if I click this, I generate it, and it will, then I save it, and I can, so then it's generated. I have my table of content with the structured short title and each contributing scenario, exposure scenario with its contributing scenario, the title section, the contributing scenario, the conditions of use, which in my case do not contain the subheading because I clicked the box not to make it shorter. I have the exposure estimates and the section 4. If I go back to Chesar, so that's hopefully what you have to do, not more. Nevertheless, you may want to customize some of the things. So what can you customize? What can you do? First of all, at use level, meaning at use exposure scenario level, you can modify 3 things. The one is the structured short title. There are specific rules to define the structured short title, and you can see more information. If you click the help text, you will find it here. Get the document which is published on the DUC website. We really advise you to look at the help text from time to time. You can have a decision whether you want to keep or exclude the PC code, for example. This is all implemented as this setup in this document, which is on the website. You can decide to have yes or no the section 3, including the exposure estimates. If you think it's not relevant, you just remove it. And you can include some information on the downstream user. So this is what you can do. It applies at the exposure scenario level. Then for each contributing scenario, you may want to do a modification. So in principle, by default, you have the list of conditions of use, which are from the CSR, in the contributing scenario from the CSR, and which are communicated. So what you see is that for each condition of use, it's displayed here as it is in the CSR, and the checkbox says it is communicated if it's checked, because this has been set up in the library in the definition of the condition of use. And here it's below how it is communicated. So in fact, there was a standard phrase associated in the library, which was this one, and it took the value from the assessment. For some of the conditions of use, it's not communicated. For example, it was decided in the library that if there is no local exhaust ventilation or no respirator protection, no need to communicate. Also, for example, the skin surface potentially exposed, this is not communicated. So this is how it has been set up in the library, and it's all by this. Nevertheless, in some exceptional cases, you may want to change something. So let's take one example. I take this same example which I took before for the workers' exposure assessment. This is this dry oven, for which, good or bad, but a PROC 2 had been selected for this contributing scenario. And it happens that for the PROC 2, the closed continuous process with occasional control exposure is communicated in a standard way with this standard phrase, which is not at all appropriate for my case. So I want to change it. I click this small arrow, and then I can see that I can provide a specific description for the SDSES. Either I find a standard phrase, I mean, as usual, and I can drying oven, I look what I have. I don't have a proper phrase here, so I will not select one. I will decide to go for a free text for the moment, closed drying oven. And this will be selected, and you see here that the way the condition of use will be communicated is like this. So now if I would like, for example, to see the impact on this, well, just to make it easier to find, I will just blink this one. So I save it, I'll have a look. This new one. So here in my condition of use for the, it's the, I need to find the right contributing scenario. It's this one. Oh, I made a mistake. Good. show you that it's easy to make a mistake in Chesar. I forgot to save. So I clicked it, but I forgot to save. You have sometimes to scroll and to save it. Mistake. So I do it again. Tick, tick, tick. Now, save again. And I get a new one. And it's relatively low. You can see here that now it is expressed as a closed drawing oven. As you can see in the exposure now for communication, there are two types. Some text is in italic and some text is not in italic. When it's based on standard phrases, it's not in italic. When it's based on free text, it's in italic, just to make it easier to understand. So you have now seen the functionalities of the box 5. You have seen actually most of the functionalities of the assessment. I will give the floor soon to Andreas, who will conclude. Just as a last reminder, don't forget, press the help text buttons in each page. Maybe there are good tips for you to see. Thank you.
So we're coming now to the end of the webinar on Chesar 3.0. You will find further information on the Chesar webpage. And again, as Elaine highlighted in the beginning, Chesar 3 has been officially released today. You can subscribe to stay up to date with the latest developments via the webpage. And there will be a training for trainers organized in the last quarter of 2016. You see here a picture of the website and a few more details on the website. There is support available, which is highlighted here in yellow. It's of course the manual. There is a help desk, ECHA help desk, to whom you can send questions, and there is a library. And a bit more details on the library. You will can look yourself once going there, just an overview. So in the library, there is a section on how to get started with Chesar. And for this, just to see how to get started, you can from there download the ECHA substance, which enables you then to try out Chesar. There are examples for a chemical safety report, chemical safety assessment, and exposure scenario examples. Part of the examples we have used today for the webinar. And then there is a link to a particular page on ECHA's website. That's the page on use maps. Where you can find information on how to generate use maps with Chesar. And in order to facilitate that, for example, if a downstream user sector organization wants to make available their use map in Chesar format, they would need a substance for this. And for this, we have created a use map substance, which is nothing else than a substance without properties. And then a downstream sector organization can use Chesar to generate a use map in Chesar format that can be then uploaded by any registrant working with Chesar. And then we have, of course, also the link to the standard phrase catalog, which is hosted on CEFIC's website. The next webinar will be on 20th of July. It will be on hazard assessment and risk assessment for REACH registration 2018. It will cover, it's part of a series of webinars on practical information to successfully register by the deadline of 31st May 2018. The webinar will give you an understanding of the type of data you need to collect for the tonnage you want to register. And it also will highlight what you should do before generating new data for your substance. And finally, it will give an overview on how to fill the data gaps and how to interact with co-registrants. If you're interested in this webinar, you can register under the shown web address. The presentations and the recording of today will be made available shortly after the webinar, and you will receive an email notification when they are published. After the closing of the webinar, you will be redirected, automatically redirected, to a short satisfaction survey, and we would be happy if you could fill that and send to us. And then there is something which you should not forget. When we close now the webinar, it's not over yet. The Q&A panel is open till 13:30. That means you can still send questions. And we will have a Q&A session, a live Q&A session between 14 and 16 Helsinki time. So we will be back at 14 Helsinki time to respond to your questions. And happy if you're interested and join then again. Thanks for joining us today and hope to see you again in our upcoming webinars.